Clinton and Nick will be discussing bringing ancient reflective traditions to hybrid spaces, so both in a workshop and a presentation capacity. So I guess without me saying too much more, it'd be great to kind of to begin with you. So over to you. I see Clinton's on my screen, so over to you.
All right, thanks, Tom. Yeah, let me move some things around, and can I share my screen here? And we actually will do our presentation first. Looks like I need to get permission to share.
Yes, I'm going to make you co-host.
All right.
You are now.
Great.
And by the way, while Clinton is setting up, there's going to be an interactive part to the presentation in a little bit. So I'm going to post the, sorry for the audio doubling. I'm going to post the link to that interactive part in the chat. In order to participate, you don't have to participate, but in order to do so, you might need to make a account on this website. It's free and whatnot, called twitch.tv. I just posted the chat there, but we'll return to that in a couple of minutes after our presentation part.
Great. Can you all see that fine? Great. Well, thank you for including us in this today. I am Clinton Carlson. I'm an associate professor of visual communication design at the University of Notre Dame.
And I am Nick Swift. I am an MFA candidate at the University of Notre Dame.
First of all, just thanks again to Sarah and everybody for making this happen. We're excited to kind of share what we've been working on this past year. And the presentation we titled Finding the Real in Real Time, Fostering Connection and Community through Synchronous and Social Engagements. We'd like to talk about design for real, meaningful experiences in real-time, hybrid, or remote settings. Our hope is that this presentation might help foster greater awareness of how technology and design can create greater connection and community for participants in these settings. We've organized this in 6 chapters. The first is Looking Behind, where we'll question approaches that emphasize technology, are extractive of users, and are focused primarily on future deliverables. And then we'll look at Enter COVID-19, where we look at the impacts of the pandemic on Nick and I, and specifically at attempts to utilize technology for remote and hybrid events. Then we'll look at what we've titled Dead Batteries, where we look at meditative practices and how technology can support those and not inhibit them. And then fourth, we'll look at what we've called smoke breaks, where we look at equitable conversations and how design can create space for them. And then we'll look at a few projects that Nick and I have done over the past year, and then end with a short discussion of some principles that we feel are at least the beginnings of thinking about how to design for real-time, hybrid, or remote experiences. So chapter 1 is Looking Behind. Nick and I are designers, and as a field, designers have always been about looking ahead, envisioning better futures. We create products that shape the future. We design experiences that connect the world, and we build brands that define new markets. But too often, these products, experiences, and brands seduce our brains and turn our own biology against our best interests, or the best interests of our planet, or the best interests of society. Industrial designer Victor Papanek identified this dark side of design 50 years ago, saying, before, in the good old days, if a person liked killing people, he had to become a general, purchase a coal mine, or else study nuclear physics. Today, industrial design has put murder on a mass production basis, creating a whole new species of permanent garbage to clutter up this landscape. Designers have become a dangerous breed. And years after Papanek's passing, this potential for mass-produced impact on society grew exponentially with the introduction of the iPhone and the forthcoming smartphone revolution. As data usage ballooned, the production of handheld software and apps followed quickly behind. As organizations saw the potential of smartphones and other connected devices, the value of design began to also grow, creating a whole new market for designers to lead and shape future products. Organizations began to develop clearly defined design processes. that attempted to design products for complex user networks by selecting a representative number of, quote, users, then getting to know and understand their needs, desires, and resources through interviews, observation, analytics, or surveys, extracting that knowledge into neatly packaged deliverables such as personas, experience maps, or storyboards. But what happens when those well-planned processes, meticulous research, and clearly defined deliverables take us to a future that is actually less social and dangerously divided? When the technology we envision as the future steals something of our humanity, maybe we should look back at how previous societies found connection with nature, their ancestors, and the communities through meditative practices, or how these societies found equitable ritual practices to connect generations, invite the next generation, initiate the next generation, and create a deeper sense of rootedness. Or look back at how earlier societies encouraged respectful communication and conflict resolution through the structures of their meeting places. And chapter 2 is enter COVID-19.
All right, so I was working as a UX designer in Chicago when the pandemic began. I was lucky that my organization was able to operate remotely when everything shut down, but that did not extend to the bars, restaurants, and music venues where my social life took place. Retreating into isolation brought my life into a new chapter, as I'm sure it did for many of you. In a lot of ways, it felt like a double life. My physical space felt like going back to the dark ages, finding ways to spend my entire existence in my little garden unit apartment. But the digital world of social media took on a whole new meaning in lieu of other forms of social interaction. I decided that this was a good enough time as any to make some changes. Like many, I dove into a new hobby to keep me sane and feel like I was using the newfound time to my advantage. For me, it was new media or code-based art that I'd seen online, but that I'd always been too busy to give proper time to. As these experiences kept getting more rich and rewarding, my other life, my digital one on social media, started feeling less and less complete. Memes could only provide so much entertainment. Text messages could only bring so much substance to my social communications. So eventually I started exploring live streaming as a way of combining my new media interest with my desire for social interaction. And what I found was pretty startling. The people I was interacting with were really there. I could feel their presence and they could feel mine. And somehow it felt more real than any of my interactions on social media ever could. And yeah, so I realized a big part of it was actually that exact real-time aspect of live streaming that made the connections feel this way. So I decided to explore that a bit further, a line of research that ended up with me back in grad school doing this type of work.
For me, the COVID-19.
You're muted.
For me, the COVID-19 pandemic uprooted my teaching and research routine, turning it entirely remote for the last 3 months of the spring semester. Through my research at that time, I met Kathy Streeter, who was beginning a newly established position as District Coordinator of Restorative Justice and Restorative Youth Leadership for the South Bend Community Schools. My research looked at the use of participatory or co-creative methods in the design of health and well-being campaigns for micro-communities. It had, until this point, been entirely in person, with workshops where the emphasis was less on design outcomes and more on developing local advocates and dialogue. Kathy was tasked with initiating a new restorative justice program in South Bend schools. To make me more familiar with restorative justice circles, Kathy introduced me to Reverend Gilbert Washington. They facilitated a series of circle conversations that brought together members from a predominantly white church and members from a predominantly Black church. The conversations were facilitated through Zoom. This happened soon after the death of George Floyd and months after the death of Eric Logan, a local Black man shot and killed by South Bend police officers. The circle methodology created an equitable space for powerful dialogue and meaningful connection, even though it was through Zoom. At the same time, I was working with Kathy and Riley High School to develop design workshops that would help the school establish restorative justice circles within the school. These workshops were planned to be in-person interactive workshops where students and faculty utilize street art techniques to create posters that would raise awareness for the circle program within the school and foster greater dialogue among peer leaders. The workshops were canceled and had to be rethought as a remote real-time experience for students and faculty. That they already live most of their weeks on Zoom, and any of these street art techniques were impossible to work towards. This left me wondering how real-time technology might complement our needs for community and creativity. About this time, Nick and I began to see connections between our responses to COVID-19, him through experimenting with real-time new media, and me through being forced to design real-time community workshops. We began to collaborate after noticing a call for presentations at the Design Research Society's experimental Festival of Emergence. The festival was a global event that spanned time zones, 2 weeks, and a wide range of design explorations. The intent of the festival was to experiment with modes of being together in an online or hybrid environment. We realized this might be more than an opportunity to transition just from in-person to virtual. Maybe it was an opportunity to rethink antiquated or unproductive parts of the typical conference experience. For instance, we began to question the question and answer times that typically follow conference sessions. In our experience, some of these sessions were dominated by individuals more interested in flexing their own intellectual muscle than truly engaging the topic or presenters. Sometimes these same voices were heard over and over, while other important voices remained silent. We wondered, could we possibly change that? That's when we began to identify unstructured and often unscheduled experiences we had found to be valuable parts of past conferences. We called these experiences dead batteries and smoke breaks. Dead batteries. We've all been there. The shame of forgetting to charge a battery, the search for an outlet, and the panic of, did I bring the charging cord? What did we do with our downtime before phones? If you've been here before, maybe your experience was like ours. It was oddly liberating. Our necks straightened up, our eyes ventured into the distant unknown, 5, 6, even 20 feet away. Our brains switched gears, and suddenly we were more present in the space without our smartphones. As designers, we began to wonder if we could create contemplative or meditative spaces that might invite participants to put everything aside, to be mindful, to reflect, and to grow a greater sense of connection with those around us. Could this be facilitated through existing technology for both online and in-person conference participants? Maybe dead batteries can make us more aware, more present. Could they awaken a desire for connection and maybe even recharge our sense of humanity? Chapter 4, smoke breaks. If you've ever had the habit of smoking, you know the routine well. A break in the schedule opens the door for a smoke break. You exit the building and enter the tribe of smokers. Conversations start a little easier. A sense of camaraderie builds as you hear others' thoughts, reactions, or stories, standing in the cold, heat, or rain. Be it cigarettes or coffee, these rituals can create equitable spaces for community that don't happen in your typical question and answer session. We began to wonder if the ancient traditions of circle conversations could foster a similar equitable space in conference settings. Could it give room for all to have a voice and a vantage point? Maybe bringing back smoke breaks can foster more equitable conversations. Could smoke breaks, without the addictive and cancer-causing agents, create a greater sense of connected community? And that's what we set out to explore in a variety of projects this past year. First, Nick began to explore how we could create dead battery moments through meditative and reflective spaces. Then I began to consider how smoke breaks might be created through creative circle conversations.
So I mentioned earlier, my first project was an exploration into how live streaming as a medium can facilitate more genuine human connections. So this instance of the project took the form of a music performance with interactive Easter eggs included throughout. This one was an activity where everyone in attendance worked together to create a collaborative diary entry. So that was that part of the project. As as time went on, myself and Clinton extrapolated some of these live streaming principles we're going to talk about in a little bit to create a collaborative meditation exercise. And y'all are actually going to be able to experience this one firsthand in a couple of minutes here. And then after that, I also created a in-person interactive installation experience called Heartbeat Here Now that visualizes the human form and heartbeat to create a space where shared experiences, mindfulness, and human connections could take place.
My exploration with circle conversations took me back to Riley High School. Well, this time it was through Zoom. I began to combine creative activities such as brainstorming with circle methods for individual and group sharing, giving students and staff a variety of prompts with time to reflect and share, helped foster more equitable and generative conversations. In this circle, participants were prompted to script a conversation with a trusted friend or family member about something that worried them. Participants were then given the option to share their conversations, reflect on their response to the exercise. Each session was noted and visually shared with the participants to see the breadth and diversity of thought that they had. In a later workshop, we utilized a persona empathy map as a means to build a broad understanding of the diverse community of Riley High School and to build greater empathy for the community. After familiarizing participants to the ideas and processes of personas and empathy mapping, participants were given time to brainstorm and then to build out these personas using the empathy map worksheet. At the end of the workshop, a group reflection was conducted as a circle discussion with 3 rounds. Here are a few of the final personas created by the participants. They were challenged to think empathetically about their peers and what they needed to hear and feel from the community, as well as what resources they might need. Through these projects, we've been able to explore the ways in which real-time experiences might create more mindful and connected community experiences. We hope that some of what we have learned would challenge extractive, product-driven, technology-focused approaches that lose sight of our humanity and connectedness. We propose these 7 initial principles for design of real-time experiences. First is making participation elective, giving people choice and voice in whether they want to participate or just observe. Fostering equitable conversations, giving a flat hierarchy that doesn't create a sense of a single leader or an ego-driven leader. Introduce communal structures that allow for equity in the conversation between participants and clear structures for how the conversation will happen. Creating shared sensory experiences and awareness of the senses around us as we begin those conversations and spend time in those meditations. And then raising awareness of shared temporal reality, the environment that we're in and about. And then cultivating spontaneity, making sure that there's room for people to be expressive and not everything is scripted perfectly. And last, establishing safeguards, making sure that as we're real time in platforms such as Twitch and whatnot, that we have safeguards so that there aren't bad actors that come into the experience. So as you consider the future of real-time events, look back to the past, consider how massive shifts in our culture like COVID-19 might allow us to question long-standing traditions. Look for those moments where we can create greater awareness of our surroundings and where we can develop deeper connection with our communities and work toward nurturing the real in real-time experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clinton and Nick, for sharing that. If anyone's got any questions, please raise your hand. I think Sarah's got one up, and then you can also use the chat box. But I'll just start off with a few comments. I think it was, and Nick especially, it's quite interesting. My presentation yesterday somewhat emphasized a very similar situation about the realness that was found in live streaming. In my case, I actually discussed a small subcultural collective in Lincoln in the UK. And they were able to kind of maintain and actually augment community through regular live stream DJ sets, which was quite fascinating. But it actually maintained, as you said, a genuine connection, as much as the virtual world could facilitate. I think that's the main thing. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was very interesting. I think you probably noticed this in this particular circumstance, the actual physical engagements now, the physical events seem to have been, I mean, they're much more reinforced by the social aspect because of how, you know, we were somewhat forced to connect and live stream to meet with it. And I think that's really fascinating. And then just one relating to Clinton in terms of the dead batteries. Actually, in the UK, I did a bit of a pilot study just as lockdown kind of came into force in this UK, which I actually found that fully charged batteries actually helped people understand their place or their location within their own place. And this was quite an interesting phenomenon, really, is that I found that more people were looking up, looking left, looking right, looking down, finding things, but then they was documenting this and then sharing that on social media. And I did a bit of a pilot study to kind of recognize that. So I think different circumstances cause different effects, essentially, but it's just really interesting points. More, I guess, general comments than question, but I know that Sarah had a hand up, so I'll pass over to Sarah.
No, I was only applauding.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought it was do you have a question?
I don't really have a question. It was very interesting for me. It's more like a comment, but that might be a bit distracting because you were mentioning finding kind of a more mindfulness space and time. And it just struck me that normally, I mean, mindfulness is a big thing in the UK at the moment. And there are these mindfulness sessions that you can attend, even as staff development time, which is like half an hour in a week. But the idea is, isn't it, that to be mindfulness 24 hours? And it's very interesting that we are not mindfulness and in a super fast pace producing and communicating, and then to just find these 30 minutes to then be mindful. Sorry, but that's not a question, just a comment. But Lindsay got a question.
Well, it's kind of a conversation. We're trying to avoid the question and answer format, are we not? Thank God. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you. And I'm just wondering, this is a question. Have you come across open space technology and things like that? Because of course the structured coffee break was the inspiration behind those sorts of methods, weren't they? And it's really exciting to see that. I mean, that was years ago, maybe 20 years ago or something. But it's really exciting to think to bring it into modern times with all the different things that are going on. So I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments, or would you like to respond to any of those points, Clinton or Nick?
Yeah, thanks. It's great to hear your thoughts. I think, Tom, that research sounds really fascinating in terms of battery life and how it affects people. Yeah, I don't know that we have, I think we have kind of, what we have for the actual workshop is simply to do a meditation and then to go through, there's some familiarity with circles, it sounds like here. So, but we'll go through a little circle as a reflection on this and maybe give ourselves a chance to, each of you to kind of bring your voice to this conversation around both of these ideas of meditation and circles, and just, and maybe even reflect on sessions from yesterday, that what are the things that you're thinking about. And then I want to give time for, we can, depending on what everybody's interested in, we can look at even the technology that we've been considering. There's certainly a lot of emerging platforms and things that are being designed for facilitating circles. We're kind of stuck in the square Zoom, as somebody mentioned here today, but certainly a lot of opportunities and exploration. So we really want to spend some time as well in the workshop of hearing what technologies others are using and are interested in, and seeing if there's ways that we can even consider those technologies and map their usefulness for some of the principles we're talking about.
I mean, are you happy to kind of go into that and into that now, Clinton? I think if everyone else is, we can move into to kind of that discussion.
I will allow Nick to bring us into a moment of meditation here.
Okay, so so this is a kind of going to be a live demonstration of one of the activities that I described in the presentation earlier. We're going to take a little minute to just meditate with each other. Thank you, Sarah, for posting that link in the chat again. So it's interactive. You don't have to participate if you don't want to. You can follow along. What we're going to do is we're going to breathe together, and we're going to follow the shape that you'll see on the screen. The shape will be kind of simulating breath. You'll kind of see what I mean. And if you want to jump into the chat, that's at that link right there. You can actually help me in synchronizing with my breath to drive the motion of the installation. So sounds maybe complicated, but all you would need to do is to press the I key when you breathe in, and then press the O key when you breathe out. I enter, O enter. You'll see me in the chat doing so. So you can follow along there. If you want to help me drive the installation. It actually it changes the more people that join in at one time. So so let me
Sorry, are we looking at the Zoom screen or at that link screen?
So the link screen should just show a text box. So you can have that to the side maybe or something, but I'll be sharing the main screen, like the installation to Zoom with my screen share here. So
I've got another technical question. Sorry. So I need to press enter after I and after O, so I can't just do.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. It's I enter when you breathe in, and then O enter when you breathe out. Well, we can talk a little bit after about like some of our technical challenges as we were implementing this this installation, but that's how it works right now. You don't need to join Twitch. If you want to actually make a comment, then you will need, or like join in the chat, then you will need to make a free account. But it's super easy to do. So we'll set a clock for 5 minutes, if that's okay with everyone. And yeah, we can just breathe together. Let me share my screen, and then we will get going. Can everyone hear the sound? Maybe thumbs up or thumbs down. No, you can't hear the sound.
No, we can't.
Okay.
It often requires you to go into your preferences, I think.
Yeah. Hold on, let me stop sharing real quick. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Yeah, this one should work. How about now? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Breathe in. Go for one last breath. Deep breath in and out. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for participating in that. And I'm gonna hand it over to Clinton to kick off our circle conversation.
Thanks, Nick. Share my screen again here. So I think I have everybody here. In the upper right, you see.
Yeah, Clinton, we can just see your
I'm sorry.
presenting.
Stop share. Give me 1 second. Try this. Okay. So as we begin our circle, let's take a minute to recognize our surroundings and your surroundings. Place your feet firmly on the ground. Take in your surroundings such as they are and feel the presence of the things and the people around you. We're coming to you from the state of Indiana, from the traditional homelands of Native peoples, including the Pettawawansi, the Miami, the Peoria, and particularly the Pokagon Potawatomi. As a group in this conference, we're scattered around the globe, but we share this particular time in history and in our busy days. Take a moment to recognize even the technology that connects us in real time. The network of satellites, the pixels, the sounds, and the binary code that let us interact. It's a miracle to me that this is all possible. We'll do 3 rounds of circle. And if you haven't participated in a circle before, you can pass. I have a list there of an order. I think that's everybody included. Please message if I'm missing you, and Nick will pass that on to me and we'll add your name there. But just as a way of order, with Zoom, it's a square like somebody mentioned. So I've got a line here. I wish it was a circle. I wish it was represented in the same way we would do this if we were in person. But we'll think of this lineup as our circle rotation that we'll go through. Again, you can speak up if you want, or you can pass. We just ask everybody to be brief, share a few sentences. We really want to hear each other and give ourselves a chance to think and respond. So the first question is asking you to reflect on your experience. What is your response to this presentation or this meditation or this moment? What is going on in you right now? And I'll start with mine. It's a little bit hectic to, at 5:30 in the morning, be juggling a few of these technological things. And so it was a moment of rest in the meditation, interspersed with a lot of busyness and activity, I guess. So that's kind of my response to this presentation and meditation today is a little more active on my end. And I'll pass it over to Nick.
I feel very centered. I feel sorry, Clinton. I think we're feeding back.
Give me a second.
Yeah, so I feel really good. I feel honored to be able to be piped in to halfway across the world to spend some time with you guys, and I am especially glad that the meditation did not break halfway through, because that's happened before. That's me.
I'm sure which do we have 2 Sarahs? because there are two in the list.
Clinton is fixing the list real quick.
Okay. So it's me. Yes. Firstly, I like the echo. It kind of fits, and it's not a disturbing echo, to be honest. And I'm mostly confused in a good way. I felt connecting to a machine, to be honest, and not to the group. So I needed to intellectually remind me that this machine is a representation of the group. And it made me feel really awkward to a machine. And I felt a bit like in this anime film, whose title I now forgot, but this probably everyone knows it. What's the anime film? Oh God, sorry, I forgot it.
Is
It
it
will come back to me.
the ghost in the machine?
Yes, the ghost in the machine. I felt a bit like that, so it's a bit scary. But yeah, thank you. It's a good way to feel in the morning. So I pass on to Tom.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to be able to connect with people. It always is, regardless of what medium we're doing that through. But I think it isn't necessarily a negative thing at all. It's just the fact that I've never quite understood meditation, and I'm yet to discover the power of it. And I think I guess confused is another word that I'll share from Sarah in terms of I guess what purpose does meditation play in relation to me. So it's something I still need to kind of learn about. It's something I need to I guess invest and involve, because I think at the way because of how busy everything is, the idea of stopping and relaxing scares me, because I feel the need that I have to fill that time, and maybe I need to invest in doing this more to kind of help advance me and I guess my mental well-being as well. So I hope that's an honest point that provides some good information, hopefully.
Thanks, Tom. You can go on. Ellie, would you have anything? How about we go on to Lindsay? Oh, I see Ellie made a comment there. I see Ellie's comment. I don't benefit from directed or group-based meditation. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Lindsay.
I'm it feels like I've got this taste on the end of my tongue, like it's all very tempting, or like a balloon maybe floating. We can't quite capture it. It's like there's a space here, there's a sort of spaciousness here, and maybe it's all a bit complicated by the things around that are stopping these things flowing freely. But it just feels really tempting, like we could go further in here, and I'm really interested in it, and I'm really excited to hear others coming at a similar thing to what we've been exploring in Utopia's Bach, which we were talking about yesterday, and I'm really enjoying it. Thank you.
Great. Marilyn.
Hi, I suppose like Tom, I don't practice meditation, but I mean, it was an interesting cognitive thought to think that this group of probably quite busy people all stopped for a few moments collectively. And I kind of quite like that idea, because I think it felt a little bit like pressing pause on an analog tape player, you know, that kind of sensation, you know, that something's gone before and you know that there's still quite a lot to come, but actually there's just this moment you can actually press pause. There's that capacity within the human condition to pause, and I think that's something that, yeah, perhaps we forget with the kind of this accelerated sense of modernity that we're actually still living through in a kind of postmodern culture. Yeah, so it was kind of interesting experience. Probably over intellectualized it a little bit rather than became meditative, but it was a nice contemplation.
Steph. Steph says, thank you for the meditation. It was a good way to start the AM here for me and our group meeting. So Zoran. And we'll go to Wanda.
Hi, thanks. I really enjoyed it and was interested because I'm in Utopia Spark with Lindsay and we use meditations in our meetings, and interested to see the commonality of a lot of groups around the world of using some similar things, like the turn to, or maybe it's not a turn for you, maybe you're already there, but to indigenous wisdom and in this time. And also I like, I can get a bit alienated by digital formats, but there's a fun and spaciousness about your presentation, which I'm really enjoying. And I really welcome the circle tool. I always feel a bit threatened by circles. It reminds me of maybe my unpleasant experience in brownies, which I only went to once. And I sort of feel a bit forced to sit cross-legged, which I can't do, and then I feel inferior. But I've been playing around a lot with Zoom visual qualities and the experience of being in it and seeing yourself when you're talking, and all the squares and Mondrian kind of shapes of it. And I really loved the idea of the visual circles, which I'm going to add to my toolbox of visual things to do on Zoom with that circle. I'm very pleased with the circle I cut out very quickly because it's very round, which shows I must be a good artist like Giotto to do a circle so quickly. It's good, isn't it? Cut it out in a few seconds, really, while you were talking. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Wanda. And Daphne.
Hello. I'm so sorry I didn't manage to join you from the beginning, so I don't think I'm in a position to comment, but I hope I will see the recorded version. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's everybody. We made it through one round. The second round, you can reflect on anything that somebody else said. And you might open this up even if you want to reflect on something from yesterday that happened. But how might maybe this conference or this presentation or this conversation be relevant to you? Are there any things that are resonating with you and your research or interests? And even if you just want to share some of your research or interests and how they intersect with this, I think that would be a fine thing to do. I hate to throw it right back to you, Daphne, but would you mind starting us in the reverse direction? Hopefully that's open-ended enough that you can respond out of what you did here.
I think that if somebody else can start, that
Sure.
would be great. Actually, thank you.
We can come back to you if you want. So,
thank you.
Wanda, any further thoughts?
I'm just answering Tom about being able to meditate when it's busy or in the middle of all the stuff going on. And I'm thinking that daydreaming might be a bit like that, you know, when you cut off, and that again, like other meditation, requires practice. And I'm very well practiced in that, daydreaming. Probably better at that than meditating, really. Yeah. Although I'm getting better at meditating. I love it. Especially short ones like this.
Zoran, I don't know if you're wanting to share or not, but you're welcome to. If
Wanda, that's actually really interesting, because now you mentioned that word daydream. I mean, daydreaming is one of the ways in which I can advance my ideas, my thoughts, and I do have to pause to daydream. So I've never actually thought and made that connection of that being a form of meditation. So yeah, thank you very much for making that connection for me.
maybe it's a more surrealistic meditation. It's probably a bit too busy for proper meditation because that's supposed to be emptying your mind, whereas daydreaming is kind of filling it with your own things, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, I was interested reading an article about, it's an idea called the continuous presence. And I think one thing that lockdown and everything, COVID-19 was allowed us to do is somewhat anticipate, and we've not anticipated, everything's kind of now. And I think I've started to look forward to things rather than expect it now. And I guess that's another form of meditation in terms that I'm daydreaming, I'm thinking, I'm anticipating. So yeah, it's nice to kind of make that connection. So it's not necessarily using that word meditation, but it's getting the same effects from it. So yeah.
It's funny how the words we call things can be so off-putting and also attractive.
See, Steph is adding, we have written a bit about the value of daydreaming, looking out the window and writing it down, and how this could benefit conversation science. And there's a link there. So Steph, do you have any other thoughts? I don't know if you can speak. I can't remember if you can speak or not, but
I'll try. I'm trying to be quiet.
Quietly, okay.
No, we were in that paper. We write about the importance of pause more in relation to conservation science, because that's what I work in. Conservation being like environmental conservation. But the poet that we worked with on that paper has written sense about, and in relation to the pandemic, she's also written related items about how taking pause and thinking about poetry and writing those things down, even if it's just a few words, can be really helpful for you in your thinking and creative process. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn, any additional thoughts?
I suppose more than the meditative aspect of this, I'm more interested in the idea of the hybrid space that you've developed, because I think that's, in a way, the thing that I've been contemplating over the whole of the pandemic, but also over the last few days, that there is a tendency culturally to dichotomize the human and the technological. And I think from the experiences that we've had over the last 24 months, I think that we have to think of ways that bring those two things together, because they're not dichotomies. The digital is actually haptic. We talk about it not being sensorial, but it is absolutely sensorial. We tap, touch, swipe every day. We feel the weight of a mobile phone in our hands, and we get sensorial experiences from the screen. So I think that was what was really interesting about the thing that we experienced, was that it did create that kind of hybrid space. And I think sometimes if we can perhaps not overthink it and separate those things, it becomes very valuable. So yeah, those are the things that I was kind of thinking through that.
It's an interesting, I think a word that comes from me in response to that is kindness, and mindful practice. There's a kindness towards yourself, but maybe even a kindness towards the technology that we overlook sometimes. We feel the technology is antagonistic, and sometimes hearing the traffic and the clanging and the grime around us might be powerful too. Lindsay.
Thank you. I think, well, one of the things we're doing in Utopia SPAC that Samina Ali has brought to us mostly, I think, is trying to be aware, like being present and being aware in the moment, which I think is related to all of this. And just saying what's going on for you in the moment, which actually I find quite difficult, but thinking about that now, the go round, which as a facilitator, I tend to avoid, it makes me feel really nervous. Like, I'm going to speak now. I need to speak now, and I need to speak coherently, but I might not be feeling coherent. And then it makes me link to this idea that we're creating spaces for things to emerge, rather than directing towards an outcome. and the tension between creating enough structure for things to emerge, but not so much that you can't follow the threads that are coming out, because that's how conversation begins. And of course, before we had a little outbreak of conversation between Vanda and Tom, for example. And I find that easier to engage with than the structure of coming to me now, because I might have wanted to say something before. So I'm quite interested in that, the tension between space and structure and emergence. And Tyson Yunkaporta talks about all we can do is create space for emergence. And I'm very interested in all of that.
I'm conscious of time here. I know we have another session coming up, I believe, and we have, I just invite, I guess, Ellie, Tom, or Sarah. I see Ellie makes a comment here. Circles are now understood to not be unthreatening spaces, and we should instead let people space themselves where they are comfortable. Comfort and participation in digital space needs to be similarly responsive and attuned to participants. When groups conform out of social expectation, it doesn't mean that our activities are well received or best suited to each participant. I've attended numerous events now that have the expectation that people take part in meditation. We should put trust in participants to meet their own needs. Facilitation isn't the same as teaching. It's listening and responding to the room. That's being present. Thank you. That's great, Ellie. Any other thoughts? I guess we have Tom or Sarah. Would you like to wrap us up and make space for the next presentation?
Tom, do you want to share something?
No, I just had it was just a space and place question, which is not necessarily relevant, but if if digital relies on us to touch things and to manipulate things and we influence it, is it actually a digital space? Are we not now creating digital place?
Sorry, can you repeat this?
Sorry, I don't know. Basically, what I was saying is, if Marilyn was talking about the way that to engage with digital, we have to touch things, we have to swipe things, we need to move things, and also because the digital space is manipulated. From my understanding, once we manipulate and once we have an aspect of the tangible, does space become place? Are we now creating digital places as opposed to digital spaces? Are we removing the abstracts from digital and structuring them? It's just a more of a thought than anything.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. Firstly, I enjoyed not following the circle regime. I hate circles as well. I don't hate them, but for example, circular walks. I really don't like circular walks. I just like walks, and then at some point I return. And because I see something very different on the way back than on the, because you look here. However, so I'm a bit skeptical of circuits as well, so I like the outbreak. But that might also be due because I like the flow. And similar to what, who said that? I'm not sure who said that, I forgot this now, but someone said that they had something to say before Vanda and Tom broke the circle. That was true for me as well. And it's good to wait and then not talk about what you thought you're going to talk about. But concerning research interests, I'm not really sure. Might all emerge at a later point. But also to add, I mean, we've got time until 12:30, if I remember the program correctly. So I don't want to, finish if there's more to share here. Don't feel too much time pressure, please.
Yeah, I don't know that we we have necessarily a culminating voice. We really, wanted to see where the conversation went. Really appreciate the different perspectives. I think Ellie's has me really thinking about the structure and even the comments of the diversity of how we interact with these things. So what does meditation become that is more loose, that is more, I walk in circles. I used to live in a spiral neighborhood that was like a labyrinth almost, and I missed that circular walking. So I'm different than you, Sarah, in that sense. And so, how do we design less structure, less, and yet invitational to people, to break away from, and to help us to see and hear and be present. I think are the questions we're starting to ask. We appreciate you guys' participation, and we're looking, and considering how we can do things differently. The I and the O in the breathing in and out is a clunky way to do it, but we're looking at sensors of how we can use motion or other types of sensors that may or may not be maybe available in a live event environment, that may not be available in an at-home environment. And some of those things bring up, accessibility issues and things like that. But these are the things that we're asking and wondering about, and sure appreciate all the perspectives you guys have shared.
Thank you, Clinton, and also thank you, Nick. Just, I guess, one comment, and it's slightly related to some of the points you mentioned there, and it does relate to this slide, actually, just thinking on some research. But a colleague of mine called Jason Wiggin, who's associate professor in design at the University of Lincoln, and myself are looking at the reconfiguration of event spaces, particularly gig spaces, to emphasize the social. Very much, I guess, since theatres became a thing, our direction has become very forward focused, and because we don't have that, I guess, that circular environment like it used to be. I mean, at least the performers were often sidelines, and the actual dance was the thing that people engaged and went to these events. It was only relatively recent that the design of venue spaces, whereas very much, especially in live music comedy, emphasized to look forward. And because of that looking forward, you have no connectivity with that person on your left-hand side and that person's on your right-hand side. And I guess the other aspect is then the kind of the social conditioning of not speaking during performances and all those bits and pieces. So we're looking at the ways, I guess, we can introduce and kind of, like I say, reconfigure the actual space to make it functional, obviously, because there's certain requirements, audio, for example, being one, but now that you have quad systems, that means that you can have a very much a surround sound perspective. So looking at the ways that these things can be done, and I worked at an event because I'm a practitioner in the festival industry, and there's a group called Boiler Room, and they do in the round events for DJs, and that's very much where the audience is surrounded by them. It does cause a few issues in terms of health and safety, and obviously kind of protection of the artists, especially if they're big. But that's been a really successful model because of its creative inclusivity, I guess. And it's also removed the barriers between the artist and the audience, and I think that's a great thing for. Again, you use that word accessibility. You're having access to the artist. Sometimes the artist is seen as kind of a godlike status, especially in kind of dance music, etc. So yeah, just I'll let you know how things kind of develop. It's very much in its infancy, but it does relate, I think, in some way to the discussions today.
It's really interesting. It feels like we've just done that, though, in a digital space, because the main screen is the performer, yet we have this peripheral matter in the chat, which was actually, we're always distracted. I'm constantly reading the chat as a kind of byproduct of this event. So I think we're already doing that in a digital space. And I think we're very critical of digital spaces, but they are actually, you know, a lot of people didn't feel comfortable speaking, but they felt comfortable in that chat space, or putting up an icon or an emoji. So I think in a way we're kind of learning things from digital spaces that we bring back into those sort of live venues.